The sun dipped below the horizon, draping the fields in shadow, but a tense air clung to the farm. It had been months since the last visit, and now the motor crew was finally back. The engines of their trucks growled to life, cutting through the evening silence. They were here for what was promised, but the farmer was waiting too right at the edge of the dirt road, his eyes like steel, his fists balled at his sides. The crew slid out of their vehicles with a mix of dread and expectation, their breaths visible in the twilight air. They had a job to do, but the weight of what loomed in the distance cast a dark shadow over their purpose. Last time they had come, the farmer had been a different man, worn and desperate, his land crumbling beneath a drought. But now he stood upright, almost defiant, his broad shoulders tense against the failings of the world around him. "Let's set up," one of the crew murmured, glancing nervously toward the man confronting them. Anxiety hummed in the air like the impending storm clouds, dark and menacing. As the crew began to unload their equipment, the farmer stepped forward. Each step crunched against the dust, a sound filled with years of struggle and pride. His voice was low, but it sliced through the air sharper than the last rays of the sun. The lead of the motor crew, a wiry man with worn hands and a heart that had seen too many battles, met his gaze. "We were here before, trying to help." The words fell flat like leaves in autumn, too brittle to provide comfort. The farmer's laugh rang bitter, filled with a lifetime of labor lost to the rainless skies. "You talk of business while I watch my fields turn to dust. My family's legacy is sown in this ground." The crew exchanged glances, their unease blooming into something more. This wasn't just a job. This was a man's life laid bare before them, raw and honest. What did they really understand about the grief hidden within those rows of parched crops? The farmer tightened his jaw. "You think you can come back after what happened last time? You left us to the wolves." With each word, the atmosphere thickened. The crew was accustomed to mechanical failures and financial reports, not to the raw nerve of desperation plain on the farmer's face. They were trained to find solutions, yet here they stood, utterly unprepared. The lead crew member's throat tight. "We want to help. We're here for the seeds, the fertilizer. We just need to get to work." The farmer's voice turned dangerously low, simmering, but there was fear lingering beneath the surface. It vibrated in the very quiet of the night, a timid echo of doubt that he struggled to suppress. "Do you know how many times I've heard that? From the banks, from friends, even from my own family. I can't keep hearing promises anymore." Dusk deepened around them, casting long shadows that wrapped around the crew and the farmer, twisting their forms into an unsettling tableau. It felt personal, charged. They weren't just lines on a spreadsheet anymore. They were people reaching for dreams and drowning beneath their weight. "It's not easy," the lead crew member said gently, "but we can't do anything from here. Let us help you." His resolve flickered in the fading light, igniting a thread of vulnerability. The farmer's expression softened for the briefest moment. Was there hope in those tired eyes? Or was it just a glimmer of that stubborn pride refusing to yield before these strangers? The moment hung heavy, a fragile thread woven into the fabric of desperation and resilience. "Fine," the farmer finally said, his voice barely a whisper, as if giving in to an invisible weight. With that, the air shifted, a current of possibilities swirling around them. The crew sprang into action, setting up machinery alongside the old barn, their movements punctuated by the rhythmic sound of metal on wood and the grunts of straining muscles. Hours slipped by, and slowly the darkness enveloped the farm completely. The only light came from the dull glow of headlights and the distant stars behind a veil of clouds. The crew often caught glimpses of the farmer, working alongside them, his face glistening with sweat and determination. A silent agreement tethered them together. Through every load of fertilizer and every twist of a wrench, the crew found fresh hope rising like the steam from their tired bodies. The farmer, a figure burdened by legacy, slowly began to transform. His posture relaxed, fingers gripping the tools with newfound strength. But deep inside, the question loomed like a specter: would it be enough? Days turned into relentless cycles of labor. The farmer and the motor crew stood side by side, cultivating the soil, planting new seeds, as if their hands were wrestling against the very force of nature itself. Between them grew a strange camaraderie, a shared understanding wreathed in the sweat clinging to their backs. As the final seeds were sown, a storm rolled in, dark clouds colliding in the distance, angry and erratic. The crew quickly retreated into the barn, seeking refuge from the violent wind and rain that would soon follow. But the farmer stood outside, steadfast and unmoving, arms crossed, watching. A crew member shouted against the howling wind. He shook his head, steadfast in his conviction. His voice rose to meet the fury of the weather. "I need this to survive." The adrenaline of that defiance surged through the air as the first raindrops fell heavily, soaking the ground and blurring the edges of reality. The storm unleashed its power, roaring like a wounded beast, but right before the lightning struck, the farmer raised his hands in triumph as if challenging the cosmos. And then it came. Rain fell, soaking the dust into mud, and with it the promise of new life. The crew watched, eyes widening as the farmer began to laugh, a sound that hailed from a place deep within, full of hope and desperation alike. Lightning illuminated his frame, and for that brief moment he appeared as a warrior reborn. He stood unwavering against the storm that had considered him an enemy, welcoming the fury. It was a sight that would leave an indelible mark on their hearts, a man battling against his fate, gunning for the fortune that had long eluded him. As the storm raged into the night, the crew couldn't help but feel a connection grow deeper, binding them not just in labor but in spirit. They had come to transform a barren landscape, but what they found was a man transforming as well, layer by layer between rain and tears. The next morning dawned bright and fresh, the world sparkling as if baptized anew. The farmer trudged out, every footfall adding to the rhythm of hope thrumming in the air. To their surprise, the crew found him smiling, looking over his land with wide eyes. "This was a hope I almost lost," he murmured, as if sharing a secret with the earth. "But look at what we've done together." The beauty of that moment slipped comfortably into their hearts, mixed with the satisfaction of their labor. In a world filled with ebb and flow, they understood the value of standing with each other against the storm. But in the depths of their celebration, tension still simmered. They all knew the fragility of this hope. One bad season, one rogue storm could unravel all their hard work, leaving nothing but ash in its wake. Yet against that looming specter, the farmer stood fearless, a testament to resilience. Days turned into weeks, and slowly green shoots pushed through the soil, daring to face the light of day. The crew and the farmer traversed the fields, inspecting each sprout as if it were a star born into their world. From desperation to uncertainty, a tapestry of potential unfurled before their eyes, vibrant against the bright blue sky. But one morning, as the crew stepped out to begin their routine check, the clouds blackened unexpectedly, rolling in ominously and churning like a wild horse. The farmer sensed it too. Dread curled in the pit of their stomachs. They were about to face nature's cruelty once more. "This can't happen again," he whispered, almost as if pleading with the universe. "Not now." One crew member stepped forward, emboldened by the bond they had forged. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." But deep down, as the wind swirled angrily around them, came that gnawing unease. They understood the nature of storms all too well. It was one thing to help someone through the worst of it, but quite another to feel their own hope crashing against that daunting wall. Yet the farmer straightened his back and faced the coming tempest, shoulders set like an iron gate. "We gave all we had." As the storm broke, with torrents of rain hammering against every surface, there was a shared understanding that transcended words. They weathered the storm together, drenched and tired, unwavering as the world seemed to crack and roar around them. For deep within, they knew that hope, once planted, could not easily be snuffed out. It didn't matter if tomorrow brought ruin or rebirth. Their time on this farm transcended mere labor. It became a story. A story woven with resilience, community, and an unwavering spirit that stood strong against the tide. And in that storm, amidst the chaos, a new beginning unfurled. The engines roared to life, cutting through the silence of the late afternoon, each growl echoing against the stillness of the fields. As the motor crew pulled into the farmyard, dust flew up like ghosts fleeing the scene. It had been months since they'd last stood on this soil, amidst the rusty tools and withered crops that painted a picture of despair. Each crew member felt it, an unshakable tension hanging in the air, charged and electric. As the trucks rolled to a stop, they glanced to the side. There he stood, the farmer, his silhouette stark against the fading sunlight. He was like a statue carved from the very earth he tended, shoulders broad and arms crossed, eyes fixed on them with a mix of anticipation and doubt. This man had been waiting, and today, he was not the same worn stranger they had encountered before. "Get out," he called out, voice steady, his features hardened by the weight of the seasons that had come and gone. There was no fear in his tone, only a conviction that spoke of years spent fighting nature's indifference. The crew hesitated, each member feeling the weight of their past, a history filled with false starts and broken promises. Last time they had come, it was with hope and a plan, only to leave him unprepared just as the drought bore down like an unrelenting beast. Now standing there, he seemed to embody that beast, fierce and unyielding. The lead crew member stepped out first, a wiry man named Tom, his hands calloused and stained from years of labor. "We're back," he said, trying his best to sound confident, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the unease fluttering in his gut. The farmer took a step forward, the sun casting shadows beneath his brow. "Help!" His voice dripped with skepticism. "How do I know you won't abandon me again?" Each word struck like a bolt of lightning. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had come ready to work, to restore hope to the soil that had all but forgotten its purpose. But here they were, confronted by a man who saw their return as nothing more than another empty promise. Tom swallowed hard, finding his footing. "You know we didn't leave by choice. Things were tough, but we're ready now. We can fix this." The farmer's gaze didn't waver. "A chance." His voice cracked under the weight of his own despair, and for a brief moment, a flicker of vulnerability broke through as though he were unraveling. They were both trapped in their histories, weighed down by past failures. Air was thick, like the humidity before a storm, and Tom could almost see the clouds gathering in the farmer's eyes, a reflection of years spent battling impossible odds. "I understand," he said quietly, "I do. But every moment we waste standing here, we're losing time." Slowly, the resolve on the farmer's face shifted. It wasn't forgiveness he offered. It was a begrudging acceptance, a flicker of hope as fragile as the seedlings they once planted together. "All right," he muttered, taking a step back. "If you're here to work, then let's get to it." The crew sprang into action, unloading equipment and tools, moving with a purpose tinged with urgency. As hours turned into dusk, they worked side by side with the farmer, not just collecting tools, but collecting fragments of a bond that mattered more than they had anticipated. They were no longer mere laborers restoring a farm. They were wrestlers grappling with fate itself. As they planted seeds deep into the earth, each push of the hoe dug deeper than soil. It dug into the very essence of trust. The farmer watched, his eyes scanning the ground, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of something different, a readiness in these men, a resolve that echoed his own. Night fell, draping the farm in shadows and moonlight. The bruised sky illuminated their efforts in a way that felt almost mystical. As they stood around a small campfire, the first real talk of the night began to swirl among them. Stories flowed easily, tales of struggles and triumphs echoed as laughter mixed with shared understanding. Tom leaned back, arm resting on his knee. "You know, I've always believed working the ground teaches you life's hardest lessons," he said, his voice rich with conviction. The farmer nodded, pausing to reflect. There was a hint of vulnerability again, an indication that their journey was more profound than planting seeds. "But every season, I've had to make choices, hard choices." "Can't yield," Tom replied, determination threading through his words. "It's about trusting your roots." The night wore on, fragile with the weight of freshly laid dreams before finally fading into morning. A new day dawned, bright and crisp, the sun spilling ribbons of light across the landscape, illuminating the potential buried just beneath the surface. But as the days passed and the crops began to sprout, the unrelenting dread of the farmer's past loomed overhead like a thundercloud. Each day, dawn would break with hope, but just as swiftly, the shadows of doubt would creep in. "You know," the farmer said one morning, packing his gear for another day of work, I can't shake the fear," Tom asked, looking up from his own equipment. "Every setback gives us new lessons, new strength." But the farmer frowned. "You've got to understand. It's not just my livelihood at stake, it's my family's legacy. If I can't stand firm, it all crumbles, all those generations before me." With each word, Tom could feel that weight. It wasn't just a farm, it was a lineage, a foundation built on sweat and sacrifice. They shared a commitment now, an understanding that this was about more than crops. It was about caring for a dream that spanned lifetimes. Days of collaboration turned into weeks of quiet hope. Green shoots broke through the soil like whispers of promise, slowly but undeniably stretching toward the sun. And throughout this journey of labor, a flicker of camaraderie blossomed between the crew and the farmer, each growing stronger, leaning on each other in moments of vulnerability. But storms, just like life, can change in an instant. The day arrived, dark and foreboding, as billowing clouds rolled in, suffocating the blue sky under a blanket of gray. The farmer's heart sank as he stood on the porch, watching the horizon shift. "It can't be happening again," he whispered, knowing all too well what such weather meant for their hard work. "Let the rain come," Tom shouted, his tone firm even amidst the brewing tempest. The storm broke with a devastating power, sheets of rain pounding the earth relentlessly, shaking the very foundations upon which they had built their dreams. The wind howled, tearing through the fields and threatening to uproot everything they'd cultivated in those brief weeks of labor. The farmer stood immovable against the front door, clenched fists shaking with rage against the dark sky. He implored the storm raging around him, a metaphorical tempest echoing through his heart. Tom stepped forward, voice unwavering. "We rebuild." And through the chaos, something profound began to unfold. The crew-weathered men who understood the storms long before they drew near rallied together. They formed a line, shoulder to shoulder, hands gripping tools not as weapons against the storm, but as vessels of their commitment. Together, they gathered what they could, staking down tarps, reinforcing the barn, barricading the doors against the onslaught. The real storm was not only the rain, but the fear that threatened to overwhelm them. And in that moment, they realized the power of their unity. They were fighting not just for crops, but for trust, for respect, and for a shared destiny that tied them together. When the storm finally broke, the sun returned, but the ground was transformed, a muddled landscape, a testament to the battles they had fought. They stood together, stunned by the aftermath, caked in mud, yet breathing heavily, alive and resolute. The farmer looked out over the fields, disappointment crushing him as he assessed the damage. But then something caught his eye, a small green sprout piercing through the dark earth, resilient and unbroken. He shouted. In that moment, hope surged, more potent than even the hardest falling rain. They could start anew. They had learned together, fought together, bled together, and they could grow together. With a renewed sense of purpose, they took to the fields, rebuilding their dreams from the ground up. The work was hard and often heartbreaking, but every inch they clawed back also brought them closer to something extraordinary. It wasn't just the crops that were growing. It was a bond formed in the furnace of struggle. Days turned into weeks, and the promise of new crops blossomed, vivid and ripe. Laughter filled the air, the once tense silence now shattered by camaraderie. The farmer, once a solitary figure amid the vast fields, found solace in shared moments with the crew. One evening, gathered around a glowing campfire, they toasted to resilience and new beginnings. Tom raised his glass, eyes twinkling with the magic of the moment. To this farm, the farmer smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. And as the stars blinked above, a new legacy began. From then on, they saw each other not just as workers and a farmer, but as co-caretakers of a shared dream. Each challenge bound them closer, weaving a narrative rich in trust and resilience. In the months that followed, their bond only deepened. The farm transformed, not just producing produce, but creating a community rooted in strength. They learned from each other, inspiring one another to fight for the future they had collectively envisioned. Though the storms would return one day, they faced the skies with heads held high, confident in their strength, united in purpose. The lessons learned amid the struggle became their foundation, each setback only fueling their resolve. And so, on that little farm under the open sky, right where the dirt met the dreams, a story of defiance became a tale of growth, an anthem to the unyielding power of community, and the unwavering roots that held them steadfast against every storm. The sound of engines echoed through the valley as the motor crew rolled back onto the dusty farm road, clouds of dirt swirling in their wake. It had been months since they last set foot on this land, and as they approached, a feeling of dread settled in their chests. Peering through the windshield, they spotted him, the farmer standing like a sentinel at the edge of his fields, arms crossed over his chest, gaze fixed like a hawk. This wasn't just any farmer. No, he was a man forged by the land, weathered and strong, bearing a history written on his face, a story etched in lines of struggle and hope. And now, here he was again, waiting, as if rehearsing a confrontation that had been brewing since they last left. "Let's make this quick," the lead of the motor crew, a man named Jake, whispered to his colleagues as he stepped out of the truck. The unease rolled off him like a storm cloud. As the crew poured out, the tension thickened like fog creeping over a winter field. The farmer's eyes narrowed, a flicker of both recognition and resentment hanging in the air. His voice was steady but had an edge like blades hidden in silk. Jake squared his shoulders. The words spilled out, perhaps too quickly, the urgency compelling him. But even as he said it, he felt the weight of unspoken history between them. The farmer took a step closer. "Help. Last time you were here, you left me with nothing but broken hopes and dry land. You vanished when I needed you most." Jake's heart sank as he glanced back at his crew. They had been sent to salvage a farm on the brink, but somewhere along the way, they had learned it wasn't just the land that needed saving. It was the spirit of the man standing before them. "We couldn't control what happened," he said, voice firm but gentle, almost pleading. The farmer held his ground, skepticism flickering in his eyes. "Promises don't save crops." Heavy silence hung between them, punctuated only by the soft rustle of the wind carrying whispers of memories past. The crew sensed it, what the farmer had built, the legacy of generations, now lay shattered under the harsh grip of drought and despair. "Let us prove it," Jake said finally, desperation fueling his words. "We can bring in new equipment, better seeds." For a moment the farmer remained still, his hardened exterior cracking just slightly, revealing the deep-set fears trembling beneath. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung thick in the air. This man had already lost too much. The crew exchanged hesitant looks, a silent agreement sparking between them. They could feel the stakes rising, palpable and urgent. "We won't fail," Jake replied, passion igniting in his voice. Slowly the farmer exhaled, a sound almost like surrender. He turned, glancing back at the dusty field stretching endlessly before him, then nodded once. "All right, you have until sunset." With that, the tension shifted, morphing into a narrow path lined with determination. As the crew set to work, adrenaline coursed through their veins. They sprang into action, hauling machinery and arranging tools, all while the farmer watched over them, arms crossed, a hawk surveying his domain. As the sun climbed higher, the rhythm of their labor reverberated against the backdrop of unyielding fields. The motor crew worked tirelessly, their hands digging into earth parched by neglect, the air heavy with the scent of dust and sweat. With every seed they planted, they were planting hope, not just in the ground, but in the heart of the man who had borne that land's misery. Hours rolled by, and with each passing moment, the farmer's skepticism softened, replaced by curiosity. He began to help, his worn hands becoming another part of the machinery pressing seeds into the earth, connecting with the soil that had so intimately cradled his aspirations. He asked at one point, wiping sweat from his brow. Jake paused, looking the farmer in the eye, sincerity reflected back. "If we give them the right conditions, they will." The farmer nodded thoughtfully, though a hint of doubt lingered in his gaze. But as their labors continued, something refreshing sparked. The promise of renewal was beginning to breathe life into the cracks between them. With each seed laid in the earth, they weren't just working against time. They were reshaping their narrative. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the field. Just as they finished, the sky erupted in brilliant hues, orange, pink, streaks of purple, all mirrored in the farmer's eyes. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a flicker of hope. But like the turn of a page, the moment shifted. The storm clouds that had loomed in the distance were gathering speed, rolling towards them with an intensity that pulled tight every muscle in the farmer's chest. He shouted, urgency fusing his words as he raced for shelter. Jake and the crew scrambled behind him, their hearts pounding as the winds intensified. The storm broke overhead, casting a dark shadow over their day's labor. Sheets of rain fell like angry arrows, soaking the newly planted seeds before they even had a chance to take root. The farmer's voice held a tremor, as if the storm thundered within him too. He stood at the barn's entrance, eyes wide, hands trembling, watching the rain wash away the fragile hope they had just cultivated. In that moment, desperation surged through Jake. This man had fought so long, what could he say to encourage him now? He shouted above the roar, "It won't kill those seeds, we've planted them, they're in the earth now." Standing just inside the barn, the farmer turned towards him, disbelief shadowing his face. "You can't know that. How can you offer me hope?" Jake ran outside, soaked within seconds, just to show how deeply he believed in the impossibility of it all. Because they want to grow. And then, energized by an impulse far deeper than simple loyalty, he extended his arms upwards, letting the rain drench him completely. A wild laugh erupted from his throat, and in that moment he could no longer tell if it was the storm or his spirit that roared. Slowly, the farmer stepped out, eyes darting between the rain and the man who stood unyielding. He felt the fear beginning to ebb away, replaced by the keen pull of life itself. He shouted with a half-smile, disbelief mixed with a hint of admiration. Jake called back, laughter ringing through the storm. For the first time, the farmer felt a strange sense of liberation, the storm unleashing the burdens he had carried for too long. He stepped forward, allowing the rain to wash over him, tears mixed with water perhaps, as the skies roared above. Little by little, he began to laugh, unsure but exhilarated. He yelled back, the chuckle breaking free, casting shadows of tension aside. Together they stood, drenched and laughing, united against the storm, their fears no longer standing between them as the tempest raged on. It became a moment of communion, of shared resilience. This storm was not the end. It was an awakening. Hours later, the storm began to fade, receding like a restless tide. As they pulled themselves back to the barn, hearts lighter, they sensed something had shifted profoundly within them, an unbreakable bond forged between soil and soul. The next morning, brilliant sunlight crept into their world, pushing clouds away like a lingering nightmare. And there it was, the ground glistened, beads of water caught in the early light, whispering promises of new beginnings. The farmer blinked against the brightness, stepping outside to behold what the storm had gifted them. His crops were still there, resilient against all odds. The sight filled him with a bubbling joy that surged through his bones. He marveled, glancing back at Jake, who leaned against the barn, breathless from the night's fervor. Jake shouted, unable to contain his excitement. The celebration erupted quickly, laughter and cheers echoed through the fields, mixing joy with relief. The farmer joined in, this tough man who had often shouldered the weight of the world, allowing smiles to blossom across his face for the first time in years. Days of hard work rolled into weeks, morning light waking them just as the crops began to stretch towards the sun, a vivid green covering the earth. They celebrated every small victory, the way the land embraced the seeds, the subtle shifting of the earth that seemed to welcome them now. And as time moved on, the bond transformed. No longer merely a crew coming to do a job, they had become part of the Soila family, nurturing the land and its keeper. The farmer became a fixture among them, transitioning from desperate guardian of the land to co-laborer, each forging their places under the sun, crafting a legacy that intermingled their lives. They found joy in the routine, stories exchanged between rows of crops like old friends gathering under a shared sky. But deep down, they felt the shadows of the past lurking, remnants of doubt lingering like a specter. Would it last? Could they truly redefine the future they had fought to create? One afternoon, as the sun rolled towards the horizon, casting amber rays across the fields, the farmer gathered the crew around him. "We've come far together," he began, voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I fear losing this again." Jake stepped closer, determination stirring once more. You've already succeeded by allowing us in. Together, we've crafted something beautiful." Confidence radiated around the group, each nod building momentum. They vowed to not only nurture the crops but also the relationship they had forged. Months passed, a kaleidoscope of seasons unveiling itself against the tapestry of their combined efforts. The farm flourished, transforming into a sanctuary of growth, abundance spilling over as they pressed against the odds. And in the heart of it, the farmer stood proud, eyes glimmering with an unspoken promise to never stand alone again. As sunsets painted the sky each evening, man and crew savored their victories together, knowing that the journey was far from over. They weren't just planting seeds, they were seeding hope, resilience, and a bond forged in the fire of trials. And so, on that vibrant piece of earth, amidst all the beauty and labor, a simple truth carved itself into the depths of their souls, that every storm would pass, but the strength of unity and trust would remain a legacy worth fighting for, again and again. The sun hung low in the sky as the sound of engines broke the silence of the empty fields. Dust swirled in the wake of the trucks, hanging in the afternoon air, caught in that moment when the world felt both endless and confined. The motor crew was back, having made the long journey after months away. But something felt different, something heavy hung in the air. The farmer waited. Standing at the threshold of his land, the farmer was a figure carved from the soil itself, sturdy, weary, and unyielding. His face, etched by sun and struggle, told a story of hope that had withered under the weight of drought. But today, as the crew approached, there was less uncertainty in his expression and more of a challenge. He was ready. "Let's get this over with," he called out, his voice rough like gravel, cutting through the noise of the truck engines. He didn't hide his disdain, having learned that hope can be a dangerous commodity on the farm. Jake, the crew leader, stepped out, feeling the weight of those words settle over them all. "We're here to help," he replied, though the ground felt uncertain beneath his feet. The farmer's gaze narrowed. Jake glanced at his crew, who shifted uneasily, sensing the tempest brewing in the farmer's heart. "We've got better resources this time." The farmer didn't budge, his arms still crossed, a barrier against the words of a man whose promises had failed him once before. Prepared, the past hung heavy between them. That last departure still pricked at the edges of their memories. Months of drought had turned crops to dust, and when the crew had pulled out, they'd left a man staring into the abyss of despair. "I understand," Jake said, taking a step forward, lowering his voice. "But we can't change the past." His heart raced. He could feel the urgency of the moment. If the farmer turned them away now, they might end up leaving for good, another regret choking the life from this land. The farmer challenged, his voice steady but laced with something fragile. Jake felt a surge of determination. "Then we find a way to make it right." The weight of those words hung in the air, a beacon in the thickening atmosphere. The farmer's grip on his arms loosened slightly, an inch of uncertainty slipping through the steel he had erected around himself. "You have until sunset." "Show me something worth believing in," he replied, turning his back toward them, the unspoken question hanging in the air: was it worth the risk? As the crew got to work under the watchful gaze of their reluctant boss, the sun beat down, turning sweat into streams that coursed down their backs. They unloaded machinery, each clang of metal against metal echoing across the empty fields. The earth, cracked and dry, seemed to sigh under their touch. They started with what they could: new seeds, fertilizer, preparation. Each task was a deliberate effort to rebuild trust, momentum swirling around them as they toiled. The farmer loomed nearby, eyes surveying every move, weighing hope against disappointment. Hours passed, and the rhythm of their labor seemed to shift the atmosphere, breaking through the grim tension that had knotted within them. As they planted each seed, they whispered promises to the earth, infusing it with a sense of renewal, not just for the crops but between them. The farmer asked, wiping sweat from his brow with a weathered hand. The doubt edged his voice, a mixture of curiosity and reticence. Jake paused, looking up at him, the sun painting his face in golden hues. "They can if you give them a chance." With each word, the farmer felt something flicker within him, an ember of hope reigniting. It was subtle, like the first hints of rain on a dry summer's day, yet it filled the air with potential. As day faded into evening, the crew finally laid down the last of the seeds. The landscape, once barren, now held tiny promises of life, each row a step toward redemption. They shared tired smiles, weary but fueling a sense of possibility. But just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, a different kind of tension crept in, a storm brewing on the distant horizon. The farmer squinted into the distance, feeling that old, familiar dread stir inside him. "Storm's coming," he warned, a hint of panic creeping into his tone. Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. It might just be a light rain, but the farmer shook his head, eyes sharp with experience. "You don't understand." And suddenly the storm didn't just seem like a weather report. It was a reflection of the tempest that raged in the farmer's heart. Rain began to patter, gentle at first, then falling harder, relentless. Their laughter faded into anxious glances as the wind whipped around them, tugging at their clothes, pulling the earth from beneath their feet. The farmer moved with purpose, guiding them toward the barn. "Get the tools." His voice snapped through the storm, urgency wrapping around them all. The crew scattered, grabbing equipment amid the rising chaos. The sound of rain beating down drowned out their frantic breaths. The storm hit with a ferocity that swallowed the daylight, the winds howling like a pack of hungry wolves. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating a scene filled with frantic movement. The crew, the farmer, all of them fighting against something that felt insurmountable. In a sudden lapse of clarity, the whole operation felt like déjà vu. "Not again," the farmer muttered under his breath. Memories of past storms flooded back, vivid and raw. He had seen the hope built only to be swept away in an instant. The pain resurfaced, flashing through his heart like lightning splitting the sky. Jake caught a glimpse of the fear shadowing the farmer's face. He shouted over the roar of the storm. The farmer's voice cracked, the agony exposed between them. Instead of a reply, Jake felt a strong desire to anchor the farmer to the moment. Jake yelled, his voice cutting through the chaos as he grabbed the farmer's shoulder, forcing him to meet his gaze. "We have already planted those seeds. Let them fight." The connection sparked, a tether forged through the storm's fury. The farmer swallowed hard, surprised at the intensity of that burning resolve. "All right," he breathed out, willing himself to trust. The crew continued hauling equipment into the barn, fighting against the wind that tugged at their very resolve. They worked as one, every bead of sweat and grit a testament to their shared purpose. They would protect not just the tools, but the dreams stitched into the fabric of that land, a legacy echoing through time. As the storm raged outside, they finally huddled together in the barn, hearts racing, listening closely to the thunder that echoed their own fears. Moments felt like hours, but amid the chaos, something shifted. The farmer began to see the crew as more than workers. They were his allies. He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, a thread of hope weaving its way into the storm's howl. "Just like we are," Jake replied, determination in his eyes. And somewhere in the depths of the storm, the seeds buried in the rain-soaked earth began their struggle for life. When dawn broke the next morning, it painted the sky in hues of hope, bright rays peeking through the remnants of dark clouds. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape. The air was fresh and crisp, a reminder of nature's resilience. The farmer pushed open the barn door, his heart pounding as he stepped outside, the ground squelching beneath his feet. What he found was nothing short of miraculous. Tiny green shoots clawed their way through the soil, thrusting upward like warriors emerging victorious from the fray. He gasped, tears welling in his eyes. They survived. His voice broke, filled with emotion that spilled over the hard-won hope. Jake stepped beside him, heart swelling with pride. "They're tough, just like you." The farmer felt the words resonate, a truth unfolding, a shared strength within them both that defied the chaotic tempest they had all weathered. With every green shoot he saw, it was as if a long-buried seed of trust had finally sprouted in his heart. As the crew joined them, laughter broke the strained silence. Together, they celebrated not just the survival of the seeds, but the bonds that had begun to form. They shouted, voices booming with exuberance that clashed against the remnants of the storm. Though the journey wasn't over, the ground still bore the scars of past struggles. They had begun to rebuild not just the farm, but the fragile yet unbreakable threads of connection that now surged between them. The motor crew had returned, But they were more than just laborers. They were brothers and sisters knitted together by trials and tribulations. Over the following weeks, they worked side by side, nurturing the seedlings as they grew. With each passing day, the farm transformed into a tapestry of life-corn stalks swaying in the breeze, sunflowers bowing toward the light. They watched the land breathe, filling with vitality, each plant mirroring the heartbeat of their renewed spirit. And amid the blossoms and bounty, the farmer, too, transformed, no longer just a man of the soil, but a nurturer, a protector, a leader among the crew. He learned to trust where he once feared, stepping forward as they faced every challenge together. Finally, one evening, as golden light bathed the fields, they gathered to celebrate the abundant harvest. The air shimmered with the sweet fragrances of fresh produce, mingled laughter wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. "Look at what we've built," the farmer said, his voice thick with emotion, a grin spreading across his face. "From dust to this," Jake chuckled, clinking his glass against the farmer's. Together, we wrote a new story. As they celebrated, cheers filling the air, the echoes of their shared journey resonated against the backdrop of endless fields. For the farmer, the crew, and the land-love, trust and resilience had sown a new beginning, binding them together under skies cleared by storms. And they all knew beyond every challenge yet to come, they had each other's backs, come rain or shine. It was a promise rooted deep in the soil they had fought so hard to reclaim, one they would carry with them, season after season, forever. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the cracked earth as the motor crew's trucks rumbled down the dirt road toward the farm. Dust swirled behind them like ghosts getting swept up in the wind, and excitement buzzed among the crew. They hadn't seen this land in months. Today they were back, ready to help the farmer resurrect his dreams from the ashes of despair. But as they approached, an unexpected sight met their eyes. The farmer was waiting. He stood at the edge of his fields, arms crossed, a fierce expression carved into his face like a stone statue. There was a palpable tension in the air, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The lead crew member, Jake, pulled the truck to a stop, heart pounding. "Okay, everyone, stay sharp," he instructed, glancing at the faces of his crew. He stepped out and felt the sun beat down like a relentless overseer. "You're back," the farmer called out, voice steady but laced with skepticism. He shot them a glance that communicated years of frustration, disappointment, and an unyielding sense of doubt. Jake straightened up, feeling the weight of the moment crashing over him. "We've got new equipment, better plans, everything you said you needed last time." The farmer scoffed, disbelief twisting his features. "You think that's worth anything to me after last time? You bylaid when my crops were dying." The echoes of their previous visit loomed like dark clouds above the field. They had rushed in with promises, wide-eyed optimism, and then left when the drought sapped the life from every plant, leaving the farmer with nothing but bare soil and sun-scorched dreams. "I understand your anger," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady, but he could hear the tremor beneath it. "Truly, I do, but we've learned from those mistakes." The farmer's eyes narrowed, flickering with doubt and vulnerability. "And if you fail again..." Silence cloaked them, heavy like the humidity of summer. Jake took a step forward, exposing the raw sincerity in his eyes. "We'll work harder." After a long moment, the kind that stretched on like an empty field before rain, the farmer's expression softened just slightly. "You have until sunset." With that, the tension shifted. It felt like a door had been cracked open, a sliver of light breaking through a lifetime of shadows. The crew wasted no time, hopping into action, unloading equipment with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The sun bore down on them as they began to lay out plans. As they got to work, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being under the farmer's microscope. Every movement felt magnified, every choice weighed against the expectations that hung heavy in the air. The crew dug trenches, prepared soil, and set up irrigation systems as the farmer watched from a distance, arms crossed, expression inscrutable. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, warmth enveloping them. But in the fleeting moments of laughter and camaraderie, there was always that steel gaze on them, a reminder that their every move was scrutinized. A few hours into their labor, Jake wiped his brow, glancing over at the farmer who still stood near the edge of the field. Jake called out, trying to ease the mounting tension. The farmer's tone sharpened, curiosity tinged with defensiveness. "Well, I need someone to help with the irrigation setup. We could use your insights." The farmer hesitated, momentarily caught off guard. Jake replied, meeting his gaze. Slowly, the farmer uncrossed his arms, walking toward them. The crew felt the shift in the air, a flicker of connection forming as they exchanged tentative smiles. As they worked side by side, threading hoses and adjusting sprinklers, the conversation began to flow. The farmer shared stories of his family, tales of the land, all the while cautious, searching for any sign that these crew members were different than before. He asked, his pride surfacing through the weariness. "My grandfather worked this soil with his bare hands, just as my father did." Jake nodded, feeling the weight of those words. "That's incredible." "It does," the farmer said, a hint of longing in his voice. With those words, something shifted within Jake. In that instant, he realized they were not just trying to save a farm, they were fighting for a legacy, for a story etched into every furrow of earth. "We're not going to let that happen," Jake said finally, his voice steady with determination. Time slipped by, and suddenly the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon. The farmer's watchful demeanor softened as he engaged more, working with the team rather than simply observing. They laughed more, shared more, and somewhere in that shared labor, they were slowly stitching their frayed bonds back together. But as the sun dipped, dark clouds rolled in ominously from the distance. The farmer's expression shifted, his eyes darting toward the approaching storm. "Here we go again," he muttered, a mix of dread and resignation flooding his voice. The first drops of rain began to patter against the dry ground, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. Jake could feel the tension mount again, panic radiating from the farmer as he rushed to gather tools and equipment. He shouted, urgency filling his voice. The crew scrambled under the barn roof, adrenaline surging. Rain fell like an unyielding drum, drowning out their voices as they hurriedly stowed away machinery, trying to shield every piece of equipment from the incoming flood. "Not again," the farmer whispered, rage bubbling beneath the surface as the familiar fear closed around him. Jake shot him a glance, the storm echoing his own internal struggle. He shouted, but even he felt the weight of those words. But the farmer shook his head, voice quavering. "You don't understand what's at stake. I've seen storms wipe everything clean, leaving nothing but ruin." With a surge of determination, Jake stepped closer, forcing the farmer to meet his gaze. "Look, we've already planted seeds. Just like us, they'll weather the storm." There in that turbulent moment, they found themselves bound by shared fears and dreams. The winds howled around them, but as rain lashed against the barn, an unexpected strength began to rise within the farmer. "We won't let that happen," Jake replied fiercely, the connection between them solidifying in that chaotic moment. Each raindrop became a testament to their fight, a reminder that they were not alone. As the storm raged on outside, they found strength in shared stories and laughter as the power of community began to break through the veil of despair. Despite the surroundings, the farmer felt a flicker of hope reignite within him, bolstered by the people beside him. Hours later, the storm finally began to wane, leaving behind a disheveled landscape glistening in the aftermath. The farmer stepped outside at dawn, heart racing, gazing over his fields with hope clashing with anxiety. And there they were, tiny green seedlings, mere whispers against the vastness of the earth. He breathed, wonder washing over him. Tears brimmed in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of joy swell within him. Jake appeared at his side, gaze fixed on the crops breaking through the moist earth. The farmer turned to Jake, disbelief giving way to gratitude. "I didn't think." "It's not just about the farm," Jake replied, heart pounding with understanding. Days turned into weeks as the crew and the farmer worked hand in hand. The crops blossomed: golden corn, ripe tomatoes, vibrant green leaves stretching toward the sky, signaling hope and renewed strength. As they toiled together, laughter filled the air. Stories were exchanged, forming bonds that transcended their initial doubts. One sunny afternoon, they gathered under the shade of an old oak tree, hearts and spirits high. The farmer looked around at the motley crew, each one playing a role in his journey. "I never believed I could trust again," he confessed, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. Jake smiled, a warmth spreading through him. Together, we're fighting for a future. You're not just a farmer, you're a dreamer. As the sun began to set on that particular day, golden rays cascading through the branches, something beautiful unfolded between them, a new legacy rooted in hope, resilience, and community. The crew gathered that evening, sharing a feast of the season's bounty. The laughter rang through the air like music, mingling with the sense of freshly harvested produce. Overcome by emotion, the farmer raised a glass, his voice steady but thick with gratitude. "To new beginnings," he declared, his heart swelling with pride. The crew echoed, voices ringing with affirmation. As each moment unfolded, a sunset painted against the sky, the simple meals shared an unbreakable thread wove itself around their lives, tying them together amidst the challenges. They had come together not just to save a farm, but to root for each other's dreams. As the seasons changed and the crops continued to flourish, the motor crew and the farmer became a testament to resilience, a vibrant tapestry against the backdrop of an unpredictable world. Together, they learned that storms might pass and fields could falter, but as long as they stood united, they would weather any storm that came their way. The journey transformed them all, and in time, they built a legacy that transcended the land, one that breathed life into every seed, nurtured by trust, faith, and the enduring power of community. And with every sunset, a new promise echoed over the horizon. The distant rumble of engines shattered the stillness of the afternoon. Dust danced behind the convoy as the motor crew rolled onto the weathered dirt road leading to the farm. For months, this land had lain dormant, a vast expanse of cracked earth and wilted dreams. Now, the crew was back, determined to breathe life into it once more. But as they approached, something unexpected gripped the air, a sense of foreboding that uncoiled like a serpent. The farmer was waiting. Standing at the edge of his fields, the farmer was a striking figure outlined against the sky, arms crossed over his chest. There was fury in his stance, a storm brewing in the furrows of his brow. This was not simply a man, but a guardian of legacy, and he had every reason to be guarded. Jake, the lead of the motor crew, climbed out of the truck, feeling the tension settle over him like a heavy cloak. "All right, everyone, this is it," he murmured to his team. "Get off my land," the farmer barked, voice low and simmering with years of pain. His gaze sliced through Jake and the crew like a sharp blade. Jake squared his shoulders, steeling himself against the weight of those words. "We're not here for a repeat of the past," he replied, the tremor in his voice betraying the resolve he tried to project. The farmer laughed bitterly, a sound devoid of humor. "Plan. The last time you had a plan, you left when the drought hit." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the shadow of their previous failure looming large. It had been a hot summer when they last arrived, full of promises they failed to deliver. The crops withered and died, and when they departed for the season, the farmer was left staring into a desolate horizon, his dreams unfulfilled. "I understand your anger," Jake said softly, grounding himself. "But we're different now. We've learned from our mistakes." The farmer's eyes narrowed, the silence between them thickening like the gathering storm clouds overhead. "A chance." His words dripped with skepticism, steeped in past betrayals. Jake took a breath, desperation urging him forward. "Let us prove ourselves," he pleaded. "We're in this together." After what felt like an eternity, the farmer's hardened expression softened just a bit. Hesitantly, he spoke. "You have until sundown." With a nod, the crew sprang into action, unloading their equipment with a mix of adrenaline and trepidation. The sun beat down mercilessly as they began to dig into the earth, their movements filled with determination, each shovelful of dirt a small rebellion against despair. The farmer watched from a distance, his arms slowly uncrossing as he began to engage with their efforts. There was something profound in witnessing strangers wrestling with the land, a flicker of hope igniting within him, but it remained tightly contained behind his walls of doubt. As they worked, the motor crew felt the weight of each task. They were not just preparing soil, they were planting seeds of trust in this man, in themselves. Each shovelful that turned the earth seemed to break apart old barriers, inching them toward a fragile connection. But as the sun climbed higher, a familiar unease settled around the farmer again. The winds began to shift, ominous gusts sweeping across the fields, carrying with them whispers of change. He could sense it, the storm looming in the distance, a dark confirmation of his deepest fears. "Hey!" one of the crew members shouted, holding up a broken irrigation pipe he'd unearthed. The farmer strode over, grim determination etched into his features. "We'll fix that," he said, voice steady, another small promise forming between them. "Right," Jake added, excitement bubbling up as he joined them. For a moment, a shared vision sparked between them. They could see the crops flourishing under the care of new technology, a lush dream building from the cracked earth. The farmer allowed a small smile to surface, almost hidden behind years of skepticism. But just as hope began to swell, dark clouds rolled in, blocking the sun's brilliant light. The farmer looked up, fear gripping his heart. "We need to secure everything now," he called out. As the first raindrops began to fall, the crew rushed to gather equipment, but panic surged through the farmer. He shouted, his voice filled with an urgency born from past failures. Jake replied, his tone firm but empathetic, "We're prepared for heavy weather." The wind howled, a ferocious beast clawing at the edges of their efforts. As the rain fell harder, the crew hurried into the barn, the air filled with tension. They stowed tools and hugged walls, listening as thunder rolled overhead like fate itself establishing dominion. The storm raged, and Jake turned to the farmer. "Look, I know you're afraid, but we planted those seeds." "I've seen storms like this before," the farmer replied, eyes wide. "They don't leave anything behind." Jake stepped closer, meeting the farmer's burning gaze. "Then let's fight." In that electrified moment, the farmer searched for something, an echo of his past resolve, perhaps. Instead, he found connection. He felt the fire within himself reaffirming. "All right, let's secure this place together." Together, they rallied, hauling equipment and reinforcing the barn, the adrenaline pulsing through their veins, hearts racing against the storm's fury. They were not just facing the tempest out there. They were wrestling with fears, shaping their futures against the claws of despair trying to pull them back. As night descended, the storm began to wane. The farmer's heart was still racing as they huddled inside the barn, breathless, wild-eyed, and soaked to the bone. With each clap of thunder, a shadow of doubt loomed, but the farmer stared at the crewmen and women fighting tooth and nail alongside him. "Thank you," he said, voice barely a whisper, but there was a spark there. "You're all still here." Jake nodded, gratitude tinging the air. After what felt like an eternity, the storm passed, leaving behind a drenched world filled with possibility. Morning light cast a golden glow over the farm, illuminating a landscape bathed in freshness. Together, the farmer and the crew stepped outside, hearts pounding with hope. The farmer asked, glancing toward the rows they had crafted together. As they made their way across the soggy ground, something caught the farmer's breath, tiny green sprouts breaking through the earth, resilient against the odds. He gasped, wonder blooming in his chest. Tears brimmed in his eyes as memories swirled, vivid and alive, the faces of his ancestors who had toiled on this land, voices whispering promises into the earth. Jake smiled, a wave of exhilaration flooding through him. The crew erupted in cheers, hearts bursting as they realized the fruits of their labor were alive and thriving. In this simple moment, something profound shifted. The farmer no longer felt like a solitary figure burdened by expectations. He felt a part of something greater, a united force given life through collaboration. Days turned into a joyful sprint, a symphony of growth, recovery, and the swirling colors of life dancing across the fields. They tinkered with irrigation systems, fine-tuned equipment, and soon, bursts of green transformed into a vibrant tapestry of crops thriving against the sun. The farmer became a fixture alongside the crew, relinquishing the weight of isolation and stepping into a role fostered by camaraderie. He began to laugh again, sharing stories and dreams not just for the land, but for their shared future, the legacy they were building together. As they harvested, an unspoken bond grew, nourished by the labor and laughter they shared. Each ear of corn picked felt like a testament to victories won together. They celebrated every small triumph, a healthy sprout here, a blooming flower there echoing their collective heartbeat. On one particular evening, beneath an endless sky streaked with vibrant colors, the farmer gathered the crew. "You've all taught me something profound," he said, emotion thickening his tone. "Trust can be fragile, but it can grow stronger when we work together." Jake met his gaze, warmth blossoming in his chest. That night, they celebrated, a feast bursting with the flavors of their bounty. Laughter echoed beneath the barn's wooden beams, mingling with the sense of fresh earth and blossoms in the cool evening air. The farmer raised a glass, filled with gratitude. He toasted, eyes gleaming. The crew replied, voices mingling in a rhythmic chorus. As they celebrated under the stars, they understood that storms would come, but together side by side, they could face anything. They had weathered struggles, revived dreams, and woven a legacy stronger than any one person could envision alone. In that vibrant tapestry of life, amidst the richness of the earth, each crew member found a home, a purpose, and a family forged by resilience and strengthened through trust. Together, they had turned a simple farm into a flourishing testament to hope, laughter, and the enduring power of the human spirit. And as they gathered beneath the starlit sky, the world whispered promises of tomorrow, each moment a seed planted, each heartbeat a shared story growing ever stronger. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and crimson, when the motor crew pulled back onto the long, winding gravel road to the farm. Dust kicked up behind them, swirling through the air like the ghosts of their past mistakes. The crew's hearts raced with anticipation as they caught sight of their destination, but one question loomed heavy. Would this time be different? As the engine growled to a stop, the door swung open, and the familiar scent of earth and sun filled their lungs. Jake, the crew leader, stepped outside, scanning the landscape that had once been so full of promise but had since turned barren. His gaze fell upon the farmer, standing resolute at the edge of the property, arms crossed, a figure carved out of stone. "I see you're back," the farmer called out, his tone colder than the autumn breeze rustling the corn husks long dead in the field. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the farmer's words pierce the thick air. "We're here to make it right," he said, searching for a glimmer of hope in the farmer's steely eyes. "Last time we left, things got out of hand." The farmer's brow furrowed, skepticism dripping from his every word. "Help, is that what you call it? Last year, when the drought hit, you vanished without a trace." Shame clawed at Jake's gut, memories flooding back the deadlines, the contracts, the excuses. They had packed up and left while the farmer fought against nature's wrath, watching his crops wither as if his very life depended on them. "We learned from our mistakes," Jake replied, anger igniting in him like a flame. "I swear we won't turn our backs again." The faintest glimmer of vulnerability flickered across the farmer's face, quickly replaced by the hard resolve that had become his armor. "You have until sunset." Without waiting for a response, the farmer turned and began walking back toward the barren fields. Hope and desperation clashed within Jake as he turned back to the crew, a silent battle of doubt sizzling in the air around them. "All right, team," he said, rallying his crew. "We've come too far to fail again." As they unloaded equipment and organized their tools, the weight of the farmer's expectations pressed heavily on their shoulders. The sun climbed higher, a relentless overseer watching their every move. The crew dug in, breaking ground with shovels and trowels, planting seeds in the dry, cracked earth. But the farmer watched from a distance, his eyes narrowed, arms crossed like a fortress around his guarded heart. Even as they toiled, they could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface, an air thick with caution and skepticism. Each moment spent working felt like a fragile act of faith, teetering on the edge of disbelief. One of the crew members asked as they planted seeds side by side, their hands caked with dirt. "It has to," Jake replied, a flicker of resolve igniting within him. "We've invested in better equipment and we've strategized for this." But doubt clung to the farmer like a shadow as clouds rolled in, gathering above them like an oppressive weight, their darkness echoing the fears unfurling in his heart. He moved closer, the tension in his muscles unmistakable. "Look, if this doesn't work then, what am I supposed to believe in?" Seconds stretched painfully as Jake turned to face him fully. "We're with you." And yet, beneath the words, Jake felt the stranglehold of uncertainty. Would any of this matter if another drought loomed? If they failed again, would it be the final straw for the farmer, The silence between them thickened until it felt suffocating. But they pressed on, laboring through the remaining afternoon, sweat soaking through their shirts. The sun hung heavy in the sky, the heat wrapping around them like a cloak that refused to let go. But then, as Jake caught his breath, something unsettling caught his eye: the distant roar of thunder rolling ominously across the horizon, crackling like the warning of something perilous to come. The farmer stood, eyes wide, as if he had sensed the storm brewing long before. He shouted, urgency sharpening his words as he dashed toward the barn. The crew scrambled, their hearts racing as the sky darkened, the air thickening with foreboding. In a flurry of movement, they rushed to pack machinery and tools, their breaths heavy with the weight of looming disaster. Something within the farmer seemed to crack as he observed their frantic movements. Fear seeped into the cracks of his resolve. He hollered, panic spilling into his voice. Jake shouted back, trying to steady his own pulse. But the voice of doubt crept back into the farmer's heart, thicker than the dark clouds above. "I've already lost so much." The air grew electric as thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the resolve of everyone present. They rushed to finish securing equipment, but the storm had other plans. The first drops of rain began to fall, like angry tears spilling from the sky. Someone yelled, and they all dashed for the barn, the sound of raindrops rapidly escalating into a torrential downpour. Wind howled, rattling the barn doors as if even nature itself sought to tear them apart. As they huddled inside, the tempest raged around them, the thundering rain drowning every other sound, each thump echoing like a drum heralding doom. The crew listened, hearts heavy, uncertainty clawing at their insides. The farmer began, voice choked. "Listen to me," Jake cut in, forcing the words to carry conviction. "We've planted the seeds. They're in the ground, fighting for life." In that moment, the storm felt less like a harbinger of death and more like a crucible they would endure together. For every clap of thunder, every gust of wind, hope and fear collided in waves, creating a storm within them all. Time blurred as they waited, each heartbeat punctuated by the unsettling sound of nature's wrath. The farmer glanced at the crew, these people who had come back to help him, risking everything. In that shared struggle, something profound shifted within him. They weren't here to abandon him. They had returned to help fight against the storm, against despair, and against the very forces that had once shattered his spirit. Eventually, as night began to blanket the world in darkness, the storm began to relent, its fury yielding to a deliberative stillness. The air felt charged, vibrant with potential, and in that heavy pause, hope held its breath, waiting to breathe again. Dawn broke with a tentative glow, illuminating a landscape transformed, the ground soaked and glistening, alive with possibility. The farmer stepped outside, his heart pounding as he surveyed the fields. Tendrils of green broke through the earth, defying the storms that had recently raged all around them. He shouted, disbelief washing over him like a flood. He turned, astonished, to see the crew joining him outside, smiles illuminating their faces as they celebrated the living proof of their hard work. Jake urged, excitement bubbling in his voice, "Just like us." Tears glistened in the farmer's eyes. He murmured, heart swelling with a mix of awe and gratitude. Days turned into weeks as they worked side by side, nurturing the crops and each other, building trust where pain had once resided. The land began to flourish under their collective effort, each green shoot sprouting a story of survival, their story. But just as they settled into the rhythm of growth, unease crept back in. The skies darkened, once more dramatic clouds roiling in a menacing form. The sunny optimism that had sustained them began to falter, fear inching back into the creases of the farmer's heart. "This can't be happening again," he muttered, anxiety threading through his gaze. Jake looked at him, pacing across the gradually sprouting fields, determination weaving through his thoughts. "We've come too far to back down now," he challenged. "We're ready." But as the thunderheads rolled in, wrapping them in a cloak of dread, the uncertainty clung tighter than ever. The storm's weight pressed against his chest, a feeling that all they had fought for was perched on a knife's edge, threatening to topple into darkness once again. They rushed back to the barn, adrenaline coursing through their veins, the air thickening with foreboding. It was a familiar dance, but the stakes felt higher this time. the weight of their shared dreams resting heavily on their shoulders. Dense clouds churned violently overhead, a reminder of all they had lost. As they huddled together, the storm broke like a dam releasing its fury. Rain poured in torrents, and as the darkness swallowed them, the ground trembled beneath their feet, fear clawing at the edges of their resolve. "Come on," Jake shouted over the roar, a sense of fierce determination igniting within him. And yet, just as he spoke, a deafening crack of lightning struck nearby, illuminating the barn with blinding white light. For a heartbeat, time froze as terror washed over them. The farmer's heart raced, his mind swirling with thoughts of despair. He implored, desperation lacing his tone. In that moment, as the storm waged its war outside, it became clear this was more than a fight for crops. It was a battle for their hearts, their spirits, and their futures. They were not just standing against the storm, they were determined to redefine their legacy. But just as they clung to one another, a chilling crack pierced the air, the world outside fading into darkness. And then, silence. In that fragile stillness, hope flickered one last time, holding its breath for the salvation that lingered just beyond the storm's wrath.